He arrives there, and it's, what do I do to claim all of the attention? This personality quirk has translated into an effective foreign policy, which is to say our foreign policy is not to cooperate with our allies because our allies are irrelevant. We are the focus. We must be the focus. And by we, Trump means I must be the focus. That then becomes the profile of America's place in the world. No other interests matter, no other nations matter, no other leaders matter.
Michael.
Joanna.
Where to begin? Perhaps by introducing who we are.
I am Joanna Coles, and I am from Yorkshire, and I have been in New York for many years and running women's magazines. So what I'm doing here on a Trump podcast, I have no idea.
What is that, Michael? What is that? I came here as the bureau chief for The Guardian, and I am Michael Wolff, who writes books about Donald Trump. I don't know what that was. And I happily edited Cosmopolitan and Marie Claire to powerhouse female juggernaut media.
But how did you get from, and it's a curious, so make the connection, which I'm interested in, between editing a women's magazine and being in the politics business now. I have an answer for this if you don't.
Well, give me the answer then.
Well, because I actually think, and I think it's highly relevant to what we're doing here, that Donald Trump is not a political person. That he comes out of, that he is a much more of a cultural phenomenon than a political phenomenon, which would give you great cred to talk about him.
Good.
So,
okay.
So I don't really mean that. Well, I mean everything in a kind of in a jabby way. But this particular thing, I think, is an important thing, and it's an important thing about what we do here. That and I think the world is handicapped by the fact that it is forced to look through a political media at Donald Trump. And when you do that, I think you see him incorrectly. So, and that's why we're here. And in fact, I think somebody could argue that I've written about politics, for many, many years, but I really haven't. I've always written about the media and its relationship to politics. So, and obviously Donald Trump reflects that part of a phenomenon, more about the media than about politics.
And I'm interested in people, and I'm interested in characters, and Donald Trump is simply, bar none, the most interesting character in the world. And I'm also interested in how one person can manage to dominate the news cycle in the way that he does. And it's just been a remarkable week at NATO. The only person that really has competed for attention, and that's because he's nowhere to be seen, is Mitch McConnell. Is there any proof of life? If there's anybody listening or watching this podcast and you have proof of life of Mitch McConnell, please surface it. It is remarkable to me that all these people are claiming they've talked to him, yet no one has a single picture of him. What has happened to Mitch McConnell? Or as someone
mechanical
McClavicle. As someone referred to him, I can't claim that I originated this phrase, but it's very good. Rigor tortoise. Has he got rigor tortoise? What a good line about Mitch McConnell.
Let's do the postmortem on Mitch, because I think he's actually a kind of fascinating figure a fascinating figure as a Trump satellite, which is what the poor man has become.
Well, and why hasn't Donald Trump said anything about him either? That's interesting, because as we know, he can't resist saying anything about anybody. I did think also, and one time I would really like to do an episode on Donald Trump's cultural influences, because I think the time he grew up is really interesting. Far fewer channels, no social media. And I think there were certain movies along the way that probably influenced him, disproportionately so. like Wall Street or Pretty Women, or I actually think,
or more as much to the point, The Godfather, which influenced an entire generation, 2 generations
yep,
of men.
of men.
Less women, I think, but certainly men.
Oh my God, not The Godfather talk. There's always a moment when you're dating, someone wants to talk about The Godfather, and
Yes.
you just want to yawn and put your head down and wake up half an hour later.
A whole business world. Actually, I recently wrote about this. God knows, this kind of flash on what I've recently written about, and then I think, when did I write about that? Oh, yesterday. But yes, that came to influence the entire 80s culture of money, of business, with Donald Trump as one of its chief exponents.
So all right, so we'll come back to that, and let's do a special episode on it. And I don't know whether or not he ever watched Entourage on HBO, which I thought was
Never.
It was.
But let's. I take that back. I doubt he did, because he was then at the point in which he was not. You couldn't settle him in front of a television. He was. If he wasn't on the television, he was not
interested in watching it.
But Entourage was about his agent.
Right, Ari Emanuel. Yeah.
Yes.
And but I was reminded of Entourage yesterday, seeing him at NATO. And I want to come back to Mitch McConnell. I want to talk about the E. Jean Carroll judgment and the fact that he may finally be forced to pay E. Jean something, as she's been slowly wending her way through the courts like you have. I want to come back to Graham Plattner, who suspended his campaign since we last talked on Tuesday. But let's talk about NATO.
Yes, NATO, because this really, really sums up, it's a Trump moment. It sums up exactly who he is and what he does. And so I had a White House conversation just before he got on the plane to go to NATO, and I said, because, and this has always been in the history, the 10-year Trump history of the staff around him, it's always been a kind of moment of holding their breath when he goes to NATO, because it's someplace that he intensely dislikes being there. And we discussed this the other day, that he doesn't like to be among a group of equals. He just doesn't like it. Doesn't like the look. Doesn't like what it says. The meaning of this. It just runs against everything in his being, particularly the picture, the ritual picture that has to be taken there. So I said to this person, I said, so what's he going to do? And this person says, I don't know, but he's going to do something. And I think that that's exactly what we've seen here. He arrives there, and it's, what do I do to claim all of the attention? And I mean, this has been a series of kind of things, including going back to war in Iran, which I think is very plausibly just there. That is obviously going to upstage the NATO meeting, then coming back to Greenland, then coming back to dismissing everyone, dissing Europe. So essentially, how could he not but become the center of attention here? But the thing is, and I think this is the fundamental point, that to remember, that's what this is about. This is about attention. Donald Trump is about attention. He's not about policy. He's not about accomplishments. He's not about America first. He's certainly not about cooperation, which is the nature of NATO. It's just about attention. And to understand that, you have to, I think, to fully understand it, you have to understand that there is no meaning beyond that. It's not about anything else. It is the only intention here is the attention paid to him. And I think you can probably extend that out, that this is, that we've seen, what has this 10 years of the Trump era been about? It has just been about what gets him attention.
Interesting. Do you think actually that he really bombed Iran again just because he could and for attention?
Well, I'm sure that that was a factor in this, and it may have been the overriding factor. Yes.
America has always built its way forward through disruption, through reinvention, through people overcoming the challenges before them. Today, the ideas shaping America's future are being built collaboratively by communities, innovators, and entrepreneurs all looking in the same direction. In storefronts, community centers, and towns, most people drive through without stopping. People are using technology and creativity to solve real problems in practical ways, building opportunity, optimism, and momentum from the ground up. We're already writing America's next chapter. We're building what's next now.
Wow. I mean, it is strange when you hear earnest and utterly sincere journalists trying to make sense out of what he does. And, you know, I read several accounts of dueling messages and conflicting messages coming out of NATO. And on the one hand, he's supportive, and he gave that strange speech saying there was so much love, so much love. And then he goes, I'm not going to say the love is all about me because people are going to say I'm conceited. He's conceited. I mean, it's fascinating the way he does these strange sort of stream of consciousness.
But it is all focusing attention
On him.
back on him.
Yeah, of course.
That reversal. Okay, this was an incredibly hostile X number of hours, hostile in every respect.
Right.
And then he suddenly gets to say, no, it was a love fest. Again, the attention comes back to him.
Right. And also, and the photo, the group photo, which you referenced in Tuesday's podcast, I was watching it as they assembled them, and I hope we can play some of the footage. Because what's fascinating is you've got the back row, then you've got the middle row, then you've got the front row. Trump obviously wants to be in the middle of the front row if he's got to be in a group shot at all. So there's a very funny part where Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, Secretary General of NATO, shakes every leader who's there by the hand and then leads them off the stage. And you can see how annoyed Trump is that he has to come and do this. And he sort of sidles up and he's really talking to the audience and thanking the audience in as much as there is one. And then he gets shown off the stage. So you can see he's irritated. And then in the group photo, they have him slightly off center on the bottom row. And again, you can just see him bridling that it's not all about him and he's got to stand with this group. And he's next to Keir Starmer, who's on his way out. So I'm sure he thinks Keir Starmer's a total loser. And the whole thing is just, it's so revealing of this craving for attention, this tiny child who just never got enough of it and who throws temper tantrums and knows exactly how to get attention.
Yeah, well, I don't know. That's an interesting thing. We never got enough of it. I mean, I think maybe actually it's the opposite is true. He has always gotten too much of it, and that has created an addiction, which obviously has to be satisfied with ever more attention.
Ever more. Well, but to me, his craving for it suggests that it was something lacking early, and whatever he gets, it's never going to be enough.
Well, apparently it is never going to be enough. We can certainly agree on that.
We can agree on that.
But, you know, it's interesting how this personality quirk has translated into an effective foreign policy, which is to say that our foreign policy is not to cooperate with our allies because our allies are irrelevant. We are the focus. We must be the focus. And by we, Trump means I must be the focus. And that then becomes the profile of America's place in the world. No other interests matter, no other nations matter, no other leaders matter.
Well, I did think of Entourage when he was there because he had Marco there, he had Pete Hegseth there, he had, I think Howard Lutnick was there, or was it Scott Bessent was there, but he had an entourage of these men, none of whom said anything. And then at the end, when Trump was leaving the podium at one point and taking his boys with him, and it reminded me, and this is why I was going back to sort of cultural moments and cultural memes. It reminded me a little bit of Danny Zuko in Greece with his kind of wingmen around him. It's like Trump travels with his wingmen. And then Marco, the Secretary of State for the United States and our national security advisor, and goodness knows how many other jobs he's got, grabs a glass from the podium and a file as he's leaving, as if he is literally the secretary, not the Secretary of State, but cleaning up after Trump, because Trump has left some notes behind, and he sort of skips down behind them all. But also Trump's insistence on sort of saying, Marco's here, Marco thinks it's great, don't you, Marco? Instead of calling him Secretary of State, this weird familiarity, as if they're all there just to support him. It's like Gladys Knight and the Pips. It's just the weirdest thing.
Yeah, and that is literally how he sees it. These are my people, my guys.
Do you think it's because he doesn't have any friends and he wants to sort of hang out with
No.
people?
He doesn't want to hang out with these people at all. He wants toadies. He wants lackeys. He wants it to be seen that these people are in a state of subservience to him.
Right. So it's a power play. It's just reinforcing his own power as the leader of the gang.
Yes, no. And he likes these people to reinforce him because that's their job. Didn't I just give the best speech of my life? Oh, you just gave the best speech of your life. And that's what this is, to be in this little bubble. That's what it is like. I mean, it's a kind of the feeling when you hear these people do it, you cringe with your own shame.
You cringe with your own shame. I wish I could be a fly on the wall for the conversations that they must have when Trump isn't in the room and they don't think they're being spied upon. I mean, how can they even have these conversations? But
they don't really. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, occasionally, if you have a relationship with some of these people, they will give you a perspective. But it's very important, and they don't really talk among each other. Nobody really shares their views of Donald Trump among each other because of the obviously the fear that anyone might betray another, which they would.
Which they would, of course they would.
But also you're in this role. It's very hard to break that role, because if you break your role and suddenly say, oh my God, what have I done? What have I become? Then you would have to kill yourself.
That's very dramatic for a Thursday.
Yes, they all maintain you're in this existential position, and it is all about survival. I know what I have to do in order to survive this. And if I do survive this, well, then, Marco Rubio, I might become the president of the United States. J.D. Vance, I might become the president of the United States. They won't, by the way, but, they, of course, think that because they couldn't go on if they didn't think that there was something beyond this.
I did an interview yesterday with Ashley Sinclair, who's a former MAGA influencer for Turning Point and a baby mama of Elon Musk's. And I asked her if she thought J.D. Vance would get to be president. And she said no, he has the charisma of a wet napkin, which I thought was rather a good description. Anyway, let us talk about the way Trump and his entourage left Turkey, because it was not as they arrived. And I was imagining them all having so much fun on the new tricked out Grift Force One as they set off for Turkey. And they're probably all just enjoying the sumptuous leather seats and the gold and the snacks and all of the things on a new plane. And then to their great disappointment, they have to come back in just plain old Air Force One. Do you want to explain why?
Apparently, the Secret Service put its foot down and said that the Qatari Air Force One had had vulnerabilities, and that given what was going on in Iran, they raised the threat level, apparently. Now, you would not know this from what Trump said. And he said exactly the opposite, which is that interesting thing that obviously this happened. That is what happened. Why else would you? I mean, there are only two reasons that you would not return in the preferred plane, which is that either the plane itself had some kind of mechanical problem, or there is this other concern that it was not properly retrofitted with the necessary security, and there were worries, and if not threats, and they would have had to have gone to this match. I mean, this would have been a confrontation. The Secret Service says you cannot go back in this plane, and Trump would have been, I mean, it's that interesting moment when, the president can theoretically overrule the Secret Service, but not necessarily. And especially if the Secret Service makes it a matter of effectively national security. I mean, I suppose you could have said that in some way that was at least relatively close to the truth. Instead, Trump lies blatantly, and said that had nothing to do with it, and we're just showing off the new Air Force One to, I think they have it landing at some military base, and we're just showing it off.
Right, we're going to let the soldiers come on board and have a look at it. I mean, yes, obviously not true.
Obviously not true.
Right.
So why does he have to do this? Well, I mean, in part, he staked a lot on this absolutely ridiculous, preposterous thing of taking this gift plane from
Qatar,
from the Qatarians, who would have likely fitted it with all kinds of things that might be harmful to the plane security and to U.S. interests. But leave that aside. Pay no attention. And that is what this episode has become. Pay no attention to the obvious. I think the focus on the nature of the lie, of his need to do this, of his, it's effectively a strategy, and it has always been. I just deny it. Right. I don't want that to be the reality. I deny it. I don't have to accept that.
Well, he was asked by a female reporter, was there a specific threat that they were responding to by changing the plane? And he said, well, I'm the number one target. I'm the number one target. And then he added helpfully, and if I go down, you go down too. This is not how one hopes presidents speak. But of course, he does speak like this because he is the president, and we shouldn't be looking for normality. We should be trying to understand who he is. But it was not unamusing that his Grift Force One, that he is so proud of, with its endless lounges and bedrooms and its 9 half bathrooms and its 4 full bathrooms, turns out not to be up to the job of flying an American president to a NATO summit in Turkey and bringing him back.
So this will be interesting to keep our eye on this story, because I would say that this indicates that there is something wrong with this plane.
Interesting. And I also wondered if he got back on the old Air Force One and started kicking it. It's again, just going to the sort of childish thing that he would be stomping around going, I hate this plane. Oh, look at this horrible sofa. Sort of kicking the tables.
No, I can guarantee that's exactly what he would be doing. I mean, he's strangely aware of his environment, or perhaps it is that loss of control over his environment. And he has this idea in his head of what things should look like and be like. I mean, it's a level of taste, although it's, of course, at all times incredibly bad taste. But the idea of how furniture should look, how things should be cleaned. I mean, it's a weird set of fixations almost in every situation that he is in. This is not the way it should be. This is the way I like it. I go to a hotel. Well, I don't want to wear those slippers if they're not in cellophane. So aides have to go out to get him the slippers in cellophane. This is not the kind of candy I like. This is the kind of candy. So I think you could say it's childish at this level. I want what I want when I want it. But it's also a kind of a particularity that is obsessive to a degree.
Well, and I think probably also he doesn't want to be on the plane because it was Biden's plane, and before that it was Obama's plane. And so before that actually it was his plane, and then it was Obama's plane. But that sense of, obviously, I think what he likes about Grift Force One is that he's the first president to ride it, and he's going to take it with him.
I'm sorry for interrupting, but which is perhaps the first time I've
nearly
said
passed
that,
out, Michael. I almost did a coffee spit.
But I have a thing because I just flashed on that when he travels, when he's out on the campaign trail and he has to stay overnight, which he hates to do, but when forced to do that, then it's very particular about the kind of hotels that he likes to stay in, that he's willing to stay in, and it's always a chain hotel, and it always is the newest chain hotel.
Right, because he equates new with luxury or new with clean, perhaps, and yet we know from reports that he throws his ice cream cartons and his candy wrappers on the floor of his bedroom in the White House. He's a messy eater.
No. I mean, one of the great descriptions I had was in this particular hotel room. I think this was in Iowa, with literally the candy wrappers. This was compared to like fall leaves on the ground. You just went
crunching through them. The poor cleaning staff.
That noise as you walk through of not leaves, but of the wrappers from the Milky Ways.
Ugh. Well, and also there were reports when he stayed in London with the royal family that he'd left the bedroom in a terrible state. That the royal cleaners were completely surprised that the American president would have left the room in this situation. But it's a sort of, I guess it's a kind of weird passive-aggressive thing, and other people clear up after you. So, another person that's got some clearing up to do, Graham Plattner. Platters has suspended his campaign and left the Dems in Maine in a mess with just over 2 weeks to find a new candidate to face down Susan Collins and try and win back the Senate.
No, extraordinary, and it goes to where the Democrats are at this point in time. Not only the broader goals to win back the Senate, but the more specific question of how did they get into this mess?
Right, and there was an editorial board column in the Times today. We're recording this on Thursday morning, saying that the problem with Platner is that the Dems are looking for personalities to mask the apparent fact they have no policy. And
you may be the first person to have read a.
Well, I don't always agree with them, but I thought this one was a good one. That in fact, what they're trying to do is say personality is not a platform. The Dems need a platform, and we really don't know what the platform is. What do they think about the economy? What do they think about immigration? What do they think about AI? We know that they think never Trump, but we don't know much else right now.
I mean, it's a little off point because, this is a local race. This is Graham Plattner is not running for was not running for president of the United States. He was running for a seat in the Senate from Maine to represent Maine in the Senate. That's how we worked. This is actually
right, but you still have to have some policies that differentiate you from Susan Collins.
Well, we do know what yeah, we don't know, but in Graham Plattner, I'm not sure that would be that's the most relevant issue to people in Maine. I mean, we do know that that is certainly in contrast to Susan Collins, that he was. I mean, he had staked out this thing that this is I'm a working man. I represent, that's who I want to represent. I represent a whole range of economic views that are antithetical to corporate America, to billionaire America, to Trump America. And to boot, and very specifically, I have taken a position against Israel. So there are I don't know what the Times is talking about, actually. They're only that they don't like these views, that there are a series of views taken by certain by Platner and by other of these insurgent Democrats that are, clear policy views. I mean, they may not be policy views that are embraced by the rest of the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party might be lagging behind on this issue, or the Democratic Party might be at an internal war. But there are real policy issues that are going on here. I think that the issue is that Schumer selected Janet Mills, the 78-year-old governor of Maine, to run for this seat, and I'm sure with a perfectly, with a logic that might have seemed obvious but was unchallenged, which is, well, she's a vote getter in Maine, and why not? Without focusing on the fact that one of the central issues among the Democratic electorate is a generational issue. Mm-hmm. So suddenly Graham Plattner became the contrast gainer. He was not a 78-year-old politician, career politician, selected by by the rest of the gerontocracy of the Democratic Party. So I think we can put this part of this problem back onto Schumer, who is a problem for the Democrats, a larger and larger problem for the Democrats. And then there is this other thing, that there is clearly a style dichotomy within the appreciation of what a politician should be. Democrats have been, I don't know. I mean, Democrats are fake. Plattner is real. Professional Democrats have become and this is true in the Republican Party too, and we'll get to Mitch McConnell, have become this administrative class, and they bear little they just don't. There is just no identification with people who suddenly want to identify with politicians. And Graham Plattner offered that. I'm a real guy. Now, that became his problem. The problem with real people is that they are real and that they have real problems. And the fact that Graham Plattner, seemed...
he seemed a little rough around the edges, which people thought would be a good thing. And of course, it turned out he was...
I think we can go further than that. He seemed kind of like a drunk.
He seemed like a reformed drunk.
And it turns out he was a drunk.
Right. It seemed like he was a reformed drunk, that he'd had people were making excuses for him, saying he had PTSD from his service in the military, but he wanted to serve. I got an interesting text from someone who's involved in getting some of the veterans elected. There's a whole group of young veterans who've served, who want to carry on serving beyond the military. And I got this note yesterday about Platner. Yeah, Platner's a hot mess. He's a guy who did this running for largely good reasons to serve purpose. But of course, there is his ego, cover of Time. I didn't realize he'd been on the cover of Time. And he is deeply
Well, that's
wounded.
because it's Time, and no one, Time magazine actually
doesn't
really exist. It doesn't really exist.
Well, that's why I didn't know he'd been on the cover of it.
It's an idea out there, yes.
But he carried on. He's deeply wounded. It's believable to me that he put himself on the woman who just came out publicly in such a way, especially if he was heavily drunk, as she notes he was, and then never had the decency or courage to speak with her after, if that is true that she reached out and asked for an apology. And there is, of course, other stuff probably not yet in the public domain. On top of it all, I'm not sure he can hack it as a senator. If he was elected, he should drop for his own sake and others.
Well, obviously, this is somebody who just came to this conclusion yesterday.
No, this was before Platner had dropped out, but it was just someone who's been very involved in looking for different kinds of candidates to address your point that a lot of, well, not a lot, but some Democratic candidates feel fake or feel like they're tied to a party line.
A lot of Democratic candidates, a lot of also Republican candidates feel fake. I mean, they have, it's an interesting thing. In the age of mass media coverage, they've protected themselves in such a way, protected their lives, their language, their look, their feel, in ways that made them opaque. And suddenly you have a media, social media, who wants a different kind of authenticity, a different kind of personality, a different kind of look and feel. So those people are at odds. And this is, of course, magnified by Donald Trump, who is, to say the least, real. Appalling, of course, but he is
he's also a hot mess of a president.
Exactly. And then we have all the things. I mean, what he has been accused of is certainly as bad or worse than what Graham Plattner has been accused of. And that's a whole other issue of why the Democrats are in this position and confronting this at a level that the Republicans don't seem to believe they have to confront.
Right. Well, it's a good thing that they're getting rid of toxic candidates. Eric Swalwell being another one.
It is, but then it becomes the thing, what is a real person? And a real person seems to have to be a toxic person too, or else you're not real. I don't know. I mean...
Well, it'd be nice to have some real people who aren't accused rapists. Of course, he's denied the allegations, we should say. Platner's denied the allegations of rape, said it's not true.
Yeah, and it's but even so, even before PTSD, well, maybe it's not such a good idea to have your favorite son a PTSD survivor.
Well, and the allegations are very similar to what Pete Hegseth faced during his Senate confirmation. Right. Exactly.
From the Republican side. I mean, think of RFK Jr. I mean, you can go down the list of Republicans that have essentially just shrugged this off.
Yeah. I mean, Pete Hegseth also accused, Joni Ernst said that she was very concerned about it, looked like she was going to be a holdout, and then was confronted with leaking details of her own messy divorce and quickly hopped back on the bandwagon to confirm him. But almost identical allegations. And again, both men clearly having had a traumatic war. So do you think that E. Jean Carroll will finally get some money out of Donald Trump? He's doing everything he can to avoid it, but it looks like yesterday a judge made a decision that it's enough and it's time, and Donald Trump has to pay her the $5 million she's due.
I think that is in escrow, so the judge has ordered that to be released. So I guess it does go to her. I don't know if the Trump side can appeal that and and try to at least try to delay that result. But it does sound like that's going to happen. Now, and I don't know what. So the other judgment, which was 83 million,
is still wending its way through the courts.
So that is, she has yet to get that, but that also, by the way, is in an escrow account.
Wow.
Or I think he had to put up a bond for that. So this money is, all of this money is there, and all of this money should eventually get to her, which is not going to make Donald Trump happy.
Well, it'll go to pay her lawyers because this has been such a long case, right? And
well, this is. I certainly hope her lawyers are not going to cost her $90 million.
No, well, I hope so too. But no, Jean Carroll, who I think lives a relatively modest life, actually will hopefully enjoy this. And she said she was going to give the money to women's causes and, sexual violence causes.
Now, the other and I remember the moments during the campaign when these judgments came down, and in which it appeared that Donald Trump would have to put up the cash, or put up a bond, or put up so much money to insure the bond, that it looked like it would force his that it could come close to forcing his bankruptcy, and that he would have to be, that there were certain major assets, 40 Wall Street building that he that he owns, for instance, that the court would have, that the court was literally on the verge of taking his property. Now, let's compare that to the $2 billion he has earned in the 17 months that he has been president.
Hopefully, Jean Carroll will actually get some cash then. So, would we give cash for a proof of life video of Mitch McConnell? How is it possible that he's lying there and no one has sneaked out a photo?
I'm interested in two things here. I'm interested in the fact that people are so on top of this. I mean, and I think we've discussed this, or at least you and I have discussed this. That, I mean, Mitch McConnell is of little consequence at this point. I mean, he's no longer a figure. I mean, we've known that he's been sick for a long time, significantly sick. He's stepped out of any kind of holding any kind of power within the Senate, and he's not running for re-election. So what's the issue about him? And I think, to answer my own question, I think he's profoundly hated, and he's hated probably for an historic reason, that he is the guy, one of the Republicans who could have stopped Donald Trump, and also understanding that Mitch McConnell was never a Trump believer. Actually, he was always a Trump hater, and Trump hated him, and yet Mitch McConnell never raised a finger, and he very well could have. I mean, in the impeachment, after Trump's second impeachment, Mitch McConnell was aware that he could have, and considered that he might well come down on the side of conviction in the Senate. And if he had come down on the side of conviction in the Senate, Trump would have been convicted, and Trump therefore would have been precluded from running for office again. So Trump, certainly the second Trump term, was in Mitch McConnell's hands, and is on Mitch McConnell's head.
Well, and I'm sure that's true from the Republicans. I think a lot of Republicans hate him too. And of course, the Democrats, because he held up the appointment of Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court, thus delivering. Who was he delivering at that point? Was it Neil Gorsuch? But delivering the beginning of the conservative court. And of course, his hostility to Obama once they won back the Senate in the midterms after during Obama's first administration.
I mean, that's certainly true. My gut, though, is that the hatred here, and it's a hatred among Republicans. I mean, Republicans, there's a not so secret underground of Republicans who would have breathed an incredible sigh of relief if Donald Trump had been convicted and if there was no second term of Donald Trump. And they couldn't do this because Mitch wouldn't do it.
So there's a whole conspiracy theory that Mitch McConnell is essentially on life support. He's in the hospital. They're keeping him alive, so there's no need for a special election in Kentucky, where he's still got his seat until November, the election in November.
But the special election in Kentucky would produce another Republican.
Except that Andy Beshear, your friend, who's the governor of Kentucky, a Democratic governor in a red state, gets to appoint the senator.
Except that's not true, except for the fact that that is not true. He doesn't get to appoint, there has to be a special election. That was actually the law changed a couple of years ago, precisely in anticipation, actually, of this.
So in theory, Andy Beshear, who's the governor, Democratic governor in a red state, has demanded a public health update. He's been hospitalized now, Mitch, for 3 weeks. And the governor has finally said, what's going on here? We need some kind of progress report.
Yeah, I mean, but to no real point. I mean, I guess the point is transparency, and one has the right to know. And certainly that would be the side that you would want to, especially the Democratic governor would want to be on. The Democratic governor who is himself likely running for president. So this is a bit of posturing, because the truth is that if Mitch is dead or incapacitated or whatever the standard would be, that you have to, in Kentucky, you have to call a special election that would result in another Republican. So the issues here are not really all that meaningful. There is not going to be any change in the nature of the Senate if there has to be a special election. So I really think it is a person that Mitch McConnell comes out of this as a truly hated figure because he did not could have stood in the way. He did not stand in the way of Donald Trump's reelection. And the irony here is, of course, that Mitch McConnell hated Donald Trump, and Donald Trump hated Mitch McConnell.
And I'm sure Elaine Chao, Mitch McConnell's wife, also hated Donald Trump. She was his transport secretary. She also worked for under George Bush. And of course, she had a sister who died in a terrible scenario where she was in a Tesla which went under water. She by accident backed into a piece of or a body of water on her property and ended up dying, couldn't get out of the car after spending the evening with some girlfriends. And Elaine Chao, who is herself the daughter of a billionaire, has been in China since her husband's been ill, which has led to all sorts of conspiracies. And Marjorie Taylor Greene, clearly anxious and fulminating for attention and missing her platform in Congress, has been saying that it's very clear that she's a spy and that this is all very odd indeed. And Laura Loomer, who we know is the president's sort of whisperer of certain things, has been telling everybody that Mitch is now in a persistent vegetative state. So with friends like Laura Loomer and Marjorie Taylor Greene, what more do you want?
And this is becoming a kind of theme. Well, we don't have three yet, so it's just two. Three makes it a theme. But this coming on the heels of the New Jersey congressman
Tom Keene,
who was mysteriously in the hospital for or mysteriously out of commission for weeks and weeks.
Yeah, he missed 146 votes.
Yes, and who has just returned to announce that he was suffering from depression and had been, as we used to say in New Jersey, institutionalized.
Can you think of any other job where you disappear for 3 weeks, nobody knows what's happened to you, and then your mates, so John Thune in this case, Senate Majority Leader, says it's all good, I spoke to him, he's absolutely fine. He's absolutely fine. I mean, if you disappeared from the podcast, Michael, that would make no sense. If you disappeared from the podcast and I called and said, well, where's Michael? Where is he? And someone said, oh, he's absolutely fine. He's absolutely fine. But you just disappeared. You would be, we would stop doing the podcast. How is it possible that these politicians get away with this? No wonder people feel that they're not represented properly. No wonder. No one can do this in a job. No one can just disappear for 3 weeks.
You know, I'll bet CEOs often disappear for
not without telling their shareholders what's wrong with them.
I'm you know, I would not be so sure about that. But I mean, the John Thune thing is interesting because if Mitch is dead or in a vegetative state or in some other way incapacitated, and John Thune has said, I spoke to him and he's fine. Well, that's the disparity there is going to be pretty hard to spin.
Mm-hmm.
A matter of fact, so hard to spin that I would think that actually it probably is, there is probably some way, John Thune knows that there is some way to spin this, that Mitch is probably, you know, not in great shape, but he'll emerge to walk with two people supporting him on each side, and he'll wink or something or blink or and that will be a stand-in for a living Mitch. Otherwise I don't know how John Thune could have said
well,
that.
John Thune said, I spoke to him, which he may well have done. We don't know that Mitch McConnell, and very specifically, they didn't say Mitch McConnell spoke back. I mean, John Thune might have said, Mitch, I've been told you can hear me. It's John, your friend. We're all rooting for you. We don't know that Mitch responded. I hope your friend, Governor Bashir, gets to the bottom of it. Do you think he stands a chance running for the Democratic leadership?
Well, I think, I mean, my friendship is based on a dinner in the Hamptons. You know, the politicians come through the Hamptons because this is where the money is. And occasionally I get invited to a dinner with a politician. Why, I'm not sure, because believe me, the money does not come from me. And he
I think you're probably one of the interesting guests.
And he was, no, I mean, I found him a very, you know, reasonable and approachable and intelligent and all of the good things that you might say about a man who was going to assume an administrative driven, policy driven office, and that I guess is good. But the other side of that was he was boring to a fault. Spoke in policy paragraphs. It was like everybody. I mean, it was a small dinner, but everybody looking at their watches or checking their phones.
That's not good. So he was boring to a fault. So he does all the things that you want a serious president to do, but he's too boring to be elected.
Yeah, so I mean, and I think that is the thing. That's the moment that we are in. Logically, you would say, what does it matter if he's boring? If he has a command over the job, if he's a reasonable person, if he has thought this through, great. But that's not the reality. The reality is that you wanna, a PTSD drunk.
Oi, oi, oi. Well, we also want proof of life videos of Mitch McConnell. So if you have one, let us know, please. So we will be back on Saturday to discuss a question that both of us are very vexed by, which is, has Donald Trump won the Epstein files? So we're going to get into that on Saturday.
Has he beaten the rap?
Has he beaten the rap? We have a ton of limericks. I discovered an entire email channel, which I didn't know about, which has got loads of limericks in it, but I've just chosen one for today, and this is by Alexandra Corker Hamill. I love the beast nightly and daily. The elephant rather acts snaily. I join in the laughter about guys they are after and wish we would have an Old Bailey. Old Bailey being the symbol of justice in the UK.
It must be a British.
I think it's
British limerickist.
I think it's a British limerickist. Well, if you have been, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to the Daily Beast if you haven't. We're independent media. The reason we can bring you these conversations is because we are genuinely independent, and your support makes a huge difference to us. You can become a friend of the Beast. You can be a Beast tier member with all sorts of benefits. But please subscribe if you haven't. And big thanks to our production team. Michael, take it away.
Ryan, Rachel, John, Neil, Heather.
And Max the intern.
Max the intern.
So the good news is we have so many Beast tier members now. There are too many names to read out, and we really appreciate your support.